trace after rain. Her name was Mia Hale. At Far Horizon Group, she'd earned herself a reputation as the department's document wrangler, the woman who could trim a 300-page project recap presentation down to a tight 30 slides, yet never pare away the tangled, messy entanglements woven into the fabric of her own life. She'd been secretly married for 2 years to Ethan Reed, the director of the tech division, her direct superior. For 24 months, they'd existed like two schematic lines drawn onto the same blueprint that never once intersected. At the office, they were colleagues bound by frigid, formal professionalism, barely exchanging more than task-related pleasantries. Back at the upscale suburban townhouse registered solely under Ethan's name, a mortgage she split evenly with him each month, they operated as flatmates with rigid, unspoken boundaries far stricter than any casual roommate arrangement. Every shared expense was logged meticulously in a budgeting app. Every household item bore a labeled sticker marking its owner. Even the half-gallon jugs of milk in the stainless steel fridge were split down the middle, his blue tape, hers cream yellow, no overlap, no accidental mixing, no small gestures of shared domesticity. That autumn, Mia pulled off a feat unprecedented in Far Horizon Group's corporate history. She sued the company. Her claim covered more than 700 unpaid overtime hours accumulated across 3 years of employment, plus a withheld performance bonus tied to a major client launch. The day the arbitration settlement landed, a sweltering Tuesday where late summer heat baked the city until the asphalt sidewalks softened underfoot, Mia stepped out of the arbitrator's office to a bank alert lighting up her phone screen. The total payout for unpaid overtime plus compensatory damages landed at just over $20,000, deposited fully into her checking account. She leaned against a half-dead plane tree lining the sidewalk, squinting at the numerical figure glowing on her device for a long stretch of minutes. Dappled sunlight filtered through its sparse, yellowing leaves, casting fractured streaks across the glass screen. The money had cleared, but a quiet, unshakable certainty settled heavy in her chest. This was not the end of her troubles, merely the opening chapter. Her prediction proved correct by 9 a.m. the following morning. A cold, surgical email from Clara Bennett, the head of human resources, sat unopened in her corporate inbox. The wording left zero room for negotiation. Given your recent legal action has severely undermined team morale and damaged the brand reputation of Far Horizon Group, executive leadership has approved a mandatory lateral transfer, reassigning you from senior administrative specialist to asset management clerk within facilities operations. A formal written response is required within 3 business days. Facilities operations was widely known across the corporate campus as the company's professional graveyard. Staff there oversaw inventory for office furniture, bulk supply restocks, and employee dormitory maintenance, work entirely disconnected from core business projects, completely severing access to performance bonuses, promotional pathways, and any viable career advancement within the firm. Mia stared at the message, her cursor hovering over the close tab button for ages before she clicked it shut without drafting a single reply. Instead, she pulled up her perpetually revised presentation deck and resumed refining the 14th slide's project workflow flowchart, burying herself in routine administrative labor to quiet the restlessness coiling beneath her skin. Muffled whispers seeped through the cracked break room door, buzzing like a swarm of persistent mosquitoes. Can you believe she actually took legal action against the firm? I heard her husband works here too. Ethan Reed, tech director, he led the Skyward platform launch last fiscal year. This is going to blow up around the whole building. How someone as sharp and calculated as Ethan ended up marrying a troublemaker like her is beyond me. Shush, keep your voice down. She could walk past any second. Mia gripped her empty ceramic mug and pushed the door open without hesitation. The 2 administrative assistants inside froze mid-dishwashing, their gazes darting away, guilty and evasive. She said nothing, stepped to the water cooler to fill her cup with steaming hot water, and turned to leave. The warmth seeping through the ceramic into her palms failed to chase the icy tremor spreading across her fingertips. She trembled faintly, not out of fear, but from a strange, thrumming anticipation, the sense that she stood mere steps away from shattering a cage that had confined her for far too long. That afternoon, Mia crossed paths with Ethan in the stairwell landing, an unavoidable collision as he descended from the tech division floor while she headed downward to the copy room. He wore a charcoal gray tailored button-down, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms, the permanent vertical crease etched between his brows deepened to a sharp, unyielding line. When his eyes locked onto Mia, his footsteps stalled, his expression hardening into an unfamiliar, detached scrutiny, no raw anger, only the clinical assessment of an engineer troubleshooting a machine that had deviated from its programmed parameters. "We need to talk at home tonight," he murmured, his volume calibrated so only her ears caught the words. The tone carried no hint of compromise, merely a rigid project deadline directive. Mia studied the man she'd shared a bed with for 2 years, a man who avoided eye contact with her within corporate walls at all costs. Her mind drifted back to their wedding dinner, both sets of parents grinning across the linen-covered table, hailing them as a match crafted for perfection. Ethan was the youngest tech director in Far Horizon's history, and she was the daughter of his former university advisor, an ideal pairing, rooted in shared social standing and mutual professional connections. On the day they filed their marriage license, Ethan had taken a 40-minute work call midweight in the municipal clerk's office, debating server concurrency bottlenecks for an upcoming product launch. She'd sat alone on the cracked plastic waiting bench, rereading the printed marriage vows until the ink blurred beneath her unblinking stare. "What exactly do we need to discuss?" Mia asked evenly. "How you plan to clean up this mess you've created?" With that sharp retort, he sidestepped her frame, his leather dress shoes clicking against concrete as he vanished up the stairwell. Mia remained rooted where she stood. The motion sensor lights timed out, submerging the narrow landing in dim, shifting shadow. After several long minutes of quiet contemplation, she lifted her feet and descended step by step, the sharp tap of her block heels echoing through the confined stairwell like a slow, resolute drumbeat. When the workday wrapped, she skipped the townhouse entirely, heading to her regular neighborhood noodle shop instead. She ordered a beef broth noodle bowl and ate slowly, savoring each mouthful without rush. Once finished, she typed out a short text to Ethan, "Stuck with urgent overtime tonight. We can speak tomorrow evening." She watched the green delivered checkmark pop up on her screen, easily picturing his reaction, browsers drawn tight, mentally labeling her response as emotional, irrational, a bug disrupting his perfectly ordered operational framework. Every action Ethan took filtered through his rigid, logical worldview. Any deviation from pre-established routines qualified as a flaw requiring correction. By 8 p.m., the open office floor had emptied out almost completely. Mia powered down her laptop, slung her canvas tote bag over one shoulder, and walked toward the building lobby. Her phone vibrated against her hip, the caller ID revealing not Ethan, but Elaine Reed, her mother-in-law. "Mia, I just heard you won your arbitration case." Elaine's voice boomed through the speaker, carrying the authoritative, unyielding cadence of a retired municipal administrator. "It's only right you claim wages owed to you, don't get me wrong, but I have to say something plainly. Matters like this should have been resolved privately through connections, not dragged before an official arbitrator. The whole company's whispering about it now, and Ethan's credibility at work's taking a brutal hit. The Skyward platform's entering its most critical development phase, and you've dumped a massive distraction right in his lap. Mom, Then there's this transfer to facilities everyone's chattering about. Just accept it, it's lighter work, less stress. Women don't need to chase constant advancement, you know. Ethan's career is skyrocketing. Your primary contribution to this household should be maintaining a stable home. With all this settled, you two really ought to start planning for a child soon." Mia stood frozen beneath the revolving glass doors, her blurred reflection staring back at her from the polished surface. Every word Elaine spoke rang achingly familiar, repeated endlessly by Clara from HR, her gossiping coworkers, every person who urged her to prioritize the bigger picture and yield quietly. The entire world had pre-written her assigned role, a compliant, accommodating spouse, a docile employee, a woman stripped of all sharp edges, soft and unassuming for everyone else's convenience. But she refused to shrink herself to fit that mold. "Mom, I haven't consented to the transfer, and I'll make my own professional choices without outside input." Mia paused, her tone smooth and unshaken as a sheet of frozen lake ice. "Additionally, I've begun exploring divorce proceedings." A full 10 seconds of dead silence stretched across the line before Elaine's voice exploded, pitched an octave higher with shock and rage. "What did you just say to me?" Mia ended the call without further exchange, pushing through the revolving door into the crisp autumn night. Early fall wind nipped at her exposed cheeks, swirling dry fallen maple leaves across the concrete sidewalk. She drew a deep, unburdened breath, a taut cord wound tight within her chest snapping loose at last. The next morning, Mia arrived at the office as usual. Rather than ignoring HR's transfer notice entirely, she composed a formal reply email, copying the corporate legal department directly. Subject: Response to proposed involuntary role reassignment. The body read, "Per federal labor regulations, unilateral reassignment without written, mutually agreed upon contract modification and documented just cause is unacceptable to this employee. Should the firm intend to move forward with this transfer, formal collaborative negotiations aligned with employment law will be required." 10 minutes after hitting send, Clara's incoming call flashed across Mia's phone screen. She tapped to answer. "Mia, what game are you playing now, openly opposing company directives?" Clara's tone was frigid, sharp with unmasked fury. "Clara, I'm not engaging in confrontation. I'm simply requesting adherence to established labor statutes." "Adherence to statutes?" Clara let out a bitter, condescending laugh laced with patronizing pity. "You're an intelligent woman. You must grasp the scale of Far Horizon Group's industry standing. Do you truly believe you can sustain a drawn-out legal battle against an enterprise of this size alone?" Mia fell silent for 2 heartbeats before responding evenly. "I only require one straightforward answer from you. Does federal labor law mandate compensation for overtime hours accrued on company time?" Clara's heavy, frustrated exhale crackled through the phone line. She avoided addressing the core question entirely, snapping a sharp warning before cutting the call short. "You'd be wise to consider the long-term consequences of your choices." Mia set her phone aside and returned to refining her presentation slides. She'd prepared herself for the absolute worst possible outcome, rendering every corporate threat little more than a faint, distant irritation. The entire office had already branded her a troublemaker. Stepping backward would not grant her peace, only trap her within the restrictive box others had constructed for her. At 7 p.m., Mia returned to the townhouse in the upscale southern suburban development, the property deed solely bearing Ethan's legal name. Warm lamplight spilled from the living room windows, an unusual sight, as Ethan almost always worked late into the evening. He sat centered on the leather sofa, a laptop open on the coffee table beside stacked printed project documents, clearly waiting for her arrival. "You're home," he glanced upward, his greeting identical to how he'd address a tardy subordinate at a department meeting. Mia slipped off her leather loafers and settled into the single armchair positioned across from him. A glass coffee table separated their seats, holding a potted fern she'd tended for 2 full years, a plant Ethan had never once bothered to identify by name. "Speak your piece," she prompted. Ethan closed his laptop, folding his hands atop his knees and leaning slightly forward, striking a practiced posture he used during technical team mediation sessions, signaling a supposed willingness for rational dialogue. "Mia, your recent actions have placed me in an impossible professional position." He framed the conversation as a post-mortem review of a failed software build. "Vice President Carter pulled me aside during the executive director roundtable to ask point-blank what was unfolding with my spouse. You can imagine how humiliating that public inquiry was. So your takeaway is that I ought to accept the facility's transfer and surrender without pushback?" "This isn't surrender, it's strategic damage control." Ethan tapped his fingertips lightly against the tabletop, a nervous tic he exhibited during tense engineering meetings. "Take the low-profile facilities role temporarily, wait for the current media buzz to fade, and I'll maneuver a lateral shift back to core admin work once the heat dies down. How long am I expected to wait? Mia cut him off without hesitation. 1 month? 6 months? Or until you finish launching the Skyward platform and secure a VP promotion, at which point you'll graciously assign me a suitable secondary position. Ethan's brows knitted into a tight, frustrated furrow. Must you frame every minor conflict as a personal slight? I pour every waking hour into advancing this firm's projects to build stability for our household. Can you simply cooperate for once? Build stability for our household? A hollow, exhausted laugh escaped Mia's throat, weighted with years of quiet disappointment. Ethan, I need to ask you something. Where exactly is this household we're supposedly building together? Ethan froze, caught off guard by the question. This townhouse is legally yours, yet I cover half the mortgage payments each month. Every utility bill, grocery run, streaming subscription is split down to the penny via our shared budgeting app. Even our refrigerated milk carries separate ownership labels. When you suffered a severe gastric spasm late one night, I drove you to the emergency room at 2 a.m., yet the very next day when we crossed paths at the office, your first request was to forward over the finalized project specification document. Mia's voice remained flat and unemotional, as if reciting bullet points from a formal meeting transcript, yet every syllable landed like a steel nail hammered into the fragile space between them. We're not living as a married couple, Ethan. We're executing a 2-year performance contract labeled marriage. Ethan's expression darkened steadily, his gaze raking over Mia's frame as if seeing the woman he'd lived alongside for 24 months for the very first time. So, what exactly are you proposing to change? I'm saying I'm exhausted. Mia rose to her feet, grabbing her canvas tote bag resting beside the entryway shoe rack. Not exhausted from overtime work, exhausted performing this hollow marital charade. I'll book a hotel room tonight and move all my personal belongings out this weekend. My divorce attorney will reach out to formalize settlement terms. Mia. Ethan shot upright from the sofa, his tone finally cracking with genuine emotion, stripped of cold logical detachment. You're throwing away our entire marriage solely over unpaid overtime wages? Mia paused at the front door, glancing back at him with a gaze unervingly calm, bordering on unfeeling. This was never about the overtime payout, Ethan. It's the realization that even unpaid overtime receives formal acknowledgement, legal recourse, monetary restitution. Every sacrifice I've poured into this marriage is dismissed as an unremarkable, expected investment, with no ledger, no accounting, no recognition whatsoever. The front door clicked shut softly, a sound barely louder than a quiet sigh. Mia stayed in a downtown boutique hotel for 3 consecutive nights. On the 4th day, she connected with a real estate agent and toured a compact studio apartment spanning roughly 480 square feet in an older, leafy residential neighborhood. The space was modest, but it featured a south-facing balcony bathed in consistent sunlight, a luxury she'd never possessed in the townhouse she'd split with Ethan. She signed a 6-month lease that afternoon, using a portion of her arbitration settlement to cover the security deposit plus 3 months of rent up front, leaving a substantial remainder untouched in her savings account. Moving day fell on a Saturday. Mia packed only her clothing, stacked storage boxes filled with art textbooks and design sketchbooks, and the potted fern she'd nurtured for years. As the moving company workers hauled her belongings into their cargo van, an elderly neighbor peered out from her adjacent front door, her stare heavy with unspoken curiosity. Mia offered a gentle, neutral smile, and the woman retreated back indoors awkwardly. This city's suburban community dynamic operated on a single unspoken rule. Residents observed joyous milestones from a distance and silently scrutinized personal breakdowns, never offering a single hand of support or sympathetic word. Once the studio was fully unpacked and organized, Mia turned her full attention to formalizing her divorce proceedings. She retained Chloe Bennett, an old college classmate specializing exclusively in family and marital law. After Mia walked Chloe through every detail of her 2-year marriage, a long silence stretched across the phone line before Chloe spoke. If you can negotiate a mutually agreeable settlement out of court, this process will wrap up quickly. The primary risk is Ethan refusing to compromise or weaponizing shared assets to pressure you into surrendering your claims. He won't concede easily, Mia predicted without hesitation. Not out of lingering affection for me, divorce would irreparably damage his carefully cultivated professional persona. Executive leadership views a director unable to manage his personal family life as a liability during promotion evaluations. Chloe released a quiet, weary sigh. She'd handled countless identical cases over her career. Marital separations rarely devolved into battles over lost love, but over public reputation and financial leverage. The day Chloe's formal legal demand letter landed in Ethan's hands, Mia received an unexpected direct phone call from him. A full week had passed since their bitter conversation at the townhouse, and his voice carried heavier exhaustion, sharpened by defensive hostility. "I've received your attorney's correspondence. Are you fully committed to following through with this divorce? When have I ever approached a serious matter half-heartedly?" Mia countered evenly. "I'll consent to divorce, but we need to negotiate terms face-to-face." Mia agreed without hesitation. They scheduled their meeting inside Chloe's law firm, a glass-walled conference room on the 28th floor of a central business district high-rise. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the sprawling metropolitan skyline, interlocking skyscrapers, winding multi-lane highways, a vast, intricately engineered circuit board stretching endlessly beneath the horizon. Mia and Ethan had once existed as two neighboring nodes wired into that corporate circuit, bound together by artificial obligation rather than choice. Ethan arrived with a typed list of pre-written settlement terms. He agreed to dissolve the marriage, stipulating all premarital property would remain individually owned, with all assets accumulated during their union split evenly. However, he attached one non-negotiable condition: the divorce must remain entirely confidential, with a public narrative framing the separation as irreconcilable personality differences. No mention of workplace arbitration, transfer disputes, or corporate conflict would surface to tarnish his standing at Far Horizon Group. In exchange for her silence, he offered an additional $30,000 as compensation. Mia scanned the densely worded agreement, her gaze halting abruptly on the asset disclosure inventory. The document omitted a private equity fund Ethan held in a custodial account, valued at approximately $420,000. His parents had supplied the initial principal investment, yet all market appreciation generated by the fund had accrued during their 2-year marriage, qualifying as joint marital property under state law. What about this private equity fund? Mia slid the printed asset page across the conference table toward him. Why is it absent from your list of shared marital assets? Ethan's eyes flickered away, a fleeting tell revealing his discomfort. The seed capital originated from my parents. It never belonged to me personally. The principal investment is their contribution, but every dollar of growth earned over the past 2 years counts as shared marital property. Mia's tone remained calm, factual. 3 years refining administrative financial reports had honed her ability to parse asset ledgers with surgical precision. Ethan, auditing expense reports and asset valuations is my core professional skill set. You can't overlook this without me noticing. Ethan's complexion darkened, studying Mia as if discovering an entirely unfamiliar adversary, far more thorough and unyielding than he'd ever assumed her to be. Must you tally every single cent down to the decimal place? What shared ground exists between us to justify skipping the financial accounting? Mia held his gaze steady. From the day we exchanged wedding vows, every mortgage payment, grocery receipt, and utility charge was logged and split precisely in our budgeting app. Now you criticize my desire for full financial transparency. A heavy, suffocating silence descended over the conference room. Outside the glass windows, rush-hour traffic flowed silently along the highway interchange thousands of feet below. Chloe stepped into the tense pause at the appropriate moment, inserting her professional mediation tone to suggest both parties retreat to review the settlement terms privately before reconvening. Mia recognized the negotiation had already collapsed entirely. Ethan would never consent to classifying the fund's appreciation as joint property, and she refused to waive her legal claim merely to preserve his public reputation for a lump sum payoff. As they prepared to exit the conference room, Ethan paused mid-step, his back turned fully toward her. Do you know what quality about you terrifies me most? Mia offered no verbal response, waiting for him to continue. I'm terrified of your relentless obsession with precise accounting. You treat every interaction between us like an annual corporate audit, leaving me perpetually suffocating under scrutiny. And what about you? Mia's voice carried clearly to his retreating frame. You could never recall how many late nights I logged working overtime, yet tracked every grocery transaction I submitted to our shared budget app down to the penny. Who exactly has been auditing whom throughout this entire marriage? Ethan provided no reply. The elevator doors slid shut around him, concealing his rigid, taut jawline from view. The settlement negotiations collapsed completely, launching a lengthy court battle filled with procedural back-and-forth. Mia submitted her formal resignation to Far Horizon Group, fulfilling the mandatory 30-day notice period while coordinating with Chloe to compile all supporting evidence for her divorce filing. News of her arbitration lawsuit and contested transfer had spread across every department, leaving HR eager to expedite her exit. The handoff process proceeded with unexpected speed and minimal pushback. Her final workday arrived without fanfare. Mia packed 3 years of accumulated office supplies and personal mementos into cardboard moving boxes. Zoe Carter, the youngest administrative assistant on the team, fresh out of college and still unjaded by corporate bureaucracy, lingered beside her desk to assist with packing. Zoe had been the only colleague bold enough to voice open support for Mia's arbitration claim, while every other coworker either remained silent or pressed her to choose compromise for the greater good. Mia, once you're gone, there won't be a single person on this floor I can talk to honestly, Zoe murmured, carefully lifting the potted fern from Mia's desk and tucking it securely into a cardboard crate, her voice thick with sorrow. You'll always have yourself to confide in, Mia smiled, gently squeezing the young woman's shoulder. Work hard, but never train yourself to shrink small to avoid rocking the boat. What's your next move? Have you lined up another full-time corporate role? I'm holding off on traditional employment for now. I plan to launch an independent consulting studio. Mia glanced around the administrative workspace she'd occupied for 3 years, her gaze drifting outward to the identical metropolitan skyline visible from the 28th floor law firm conference room weeks prior. Perspective shifted dramatically based on elevation, a bird's-eye overlook from high-rise executive floors, a neutral horizontal view from the mid-rise admin wing, and a grounded, unfiltered vantage point from street level. Stepping outside the corporate bubble might let me see the city through an entirely new lens. She carried her stacked cardboard crates through the office exit, glancing back at the polished glass lobby emblazoned with Far Horizon Group's geometric logo, a sleek abstract design marketed to symbolize forward-thinking vision and unparalleled excellence. Once, the emblem had struck her as powerful, aspirational. Now it resembled a meticulously engineered gear system, locking every employee into a fixed rotational slot, forced to operate at a uniform, preordained speed. Mia had simply deviated from the mandated rotation cycle. The instant she stepped through the revolving glass doors, bright autumn sunlight washed over her frame, warm and unreserved in its intensity. She stood motionless for several quiet seconds, then turned toward the subway station with steady, unhurried strides. The initial divorce court hearing convened in early November. Ethan's legal team filed a motion to seal all proceedings from public view, citing concerns that open testimony would damage his professional standing at Far Horizon Group. Mia raised no objection. She sought equitable financial resolution, not a public spectacle designed to humiliate her former husband. Inside the courtroom, Ethan's attorney presented an unanticipated legal argument that caught both Mia and Chloe entirely off guard. Mia had allegedly concealed marital income streams during their marriage by accepting freelance client work after hours, drafting brand copy and designing event layouts for independent small businesses. These supplementary earnings, totaling roughly $12,000 across 3 years, had been deposited into a separate personal checking account, never integrated into their shared household budget. His legal counsel framed this as deliberate concealment of joint marital assets, a claim that could skew the judge's asset division ruling against Mia. Mia's palms grew slick with nervous sweat as she sat at the plaintiff's table. She had never disclosed her freelance side projects to Ethan, not out of deceptive intent, but due to a dismissive comment he'd made over dinner years prior, dismissing all after-hours freelance work as a reckless distraction that diluted focus from primary corporate responsibilities. She'd avoided enduring his patronizing lectures by omitting the work entirely, yet that choice now functioned as a legal weapon wielded against her. Can you explain why you withheld information about these consistent freelance client projects from your spouse? Ethan's attorney asked, his tone polite yet razor-sharp with cross-examination precision. Mia paused to gather her thoughts before responding clearly. I required unrestricted personal disposable income. You required supplementary income? Was your husband's salary insufficient to cover all household expenditures? His salary fully covered the core household bills. Mia lifted her chin, meeting the opposing attorney's gaze unflinchingly. However, those expenses solely serviced assets registered exclusively under his name: the townhouse mortgage, his parents' medical insurance premiums, corporate networking event entertainment costs. Every personal expense I incurred, financial support for my aging parents, professional design coursework, clothing, personal health care, came entirely from my base salary. Our entire marriage operated on a strict itemized split of every minor household cost. I needed a source of income free from his oversight, free from mandatory budget line item approvals for every personal purchase. A beat of absolute silence rippled through the courtroom. Mia noticed the female court reporter's typing fingers falter momentarily before resuming transcribing testimony at full speed. Ethan sat rigid at the defendant's table, maintaining a blank, impassive facade, yet Mia spotted the tight flex of his jaw muscle, a physical tell he exhibited whenever suppressing overwhelming frustration. Once the hearing adjourned, Chloe's expression carried heavy concern as they stepped onto the courthouse stone steps, crisp autumn wind whipping the hem of Mia's wool coat. While the concealed income allegation won't tank your entire claim, the judge may assign a slight imbalance to the asset split ruling as a mitigating adjustment against you. I'm aware of the risk. Mia stared out across the windswept plaza, a quiet resolve settling deep within her bones. But I hold counter-evidence to offset this line of attack. That critical counter-evidence had surfaced by pure accident 2 weeks prior. While sorting through every financial record generated during their marriage, Mia recalled an outdated laptop Ethan had retired 2 years prior, abandoned atop the home office bookshelf collecting dust. She'd hauled the device to her studio during moving day, originally intending only to retrieve archived shared household budget spreadsheets. Over 2 consecutive sleepless nights, she combed through every stored file, uncovering cached private chat logs autosaved from Ethan's old personal messaging application. The conversation thread belonged to a contact labeled Greg Lowe, Horizon Tech Suppliers, detailing proprietary technical specifications for the Skyward Platform Phase 1 tender. Mia possessed no formal software engineering background, yet 3 years of administrative document curation had trained her to extract critical data from disorganized raw information. She pieced together the fragmented chat screenshots, cross-referencing timestamps against the official public bidding schedule for the $28 million Skyward contract, uncovering a clear violation of corporate confidentiality protocols. During the formal tender window, Ethan had privately shared restricted project technical parameters with Greg Lowe, the lead technical representative of Horizon Tech Suppliers. The firm ultimately awarded the high-value development contract by a razor-thin margin. No evidence of monetary kickbacks or bribery existed within the cached logs, yet the unauthorized disclosure of proprietary project data constituted a severe breach of Far Horizon's internal non-disclosure policy, carrying professional consequences ranging from demotion to immediate termination for Ethan. Mia stared at the digitized screenshots for hours, her hands trembling at the realization she now held evidence capable of permanently destroying Ethan's corporate career. Her mind replayed every slight and injury accumulated over 2 years, his cold dismissal of her arbitration struggle, his legal team's calculated attack painting her as a dishonest asset hoarder, the endless granular budget tracking that stripped all warmth from their shared living space. She dialed Chloe's cell phone without further hesitation. "Chloe, I need you to review a set of digital records I've compiled." "What documentation are we working with?" Proof. Ethan leaked confidential Skyward platform tender data to a competing vendor during Phase 1 bidding. Mia's tone remained neutral, as if discussing a third party's unrelated dispute. "I intend to hold these records confidential as leverage. If Ethan withdraws his concealed income claim and agrees to my original asset split terms, these files will never surface to anyone outside our legal team. If he persists with aggressive litigation tactics, then we present this evidence to force a mutually favorable settlement, mutually assured professional fallout for both sides." Chloe finished her sentence for her. Mia hesitated briefly before answering. "This isn't retaliation. It's reciprocal accountability." 3 days ahead of the second scheduled court hearing, Chloe arranged an off-the-record informal mediation session between opposing legal counsel at her firm. A confidential meeting unlogged in official court filings intended to gauge each party's unspoken negotiation limits. During their discussion, Chloe laid the organized folder containing Ethan's confidential data breach evidence flat on the conference table, leaving it unopened as she delivered a measured statement to Ethan's attorney, Mr. Torres, a middle-aged man with immaculately combed dark hair and a stern, no-nonsense demeanor. "We are willing to concede the judge's discretionary ruling on the freelance income disclosure claim. However, before proceeding to formal testimony, I urge you to review whether your client's submitted evidence list omits any material information that could severely jeopardize his professional standing at Far Horizon Group." Mr. Torres's sharp eyes flickered toward the sealed folder, his composed professional demeanor fracturing for a split second. He declined to respond immediately, stating he required private consultation with Ethan before delivering a formal counteroffer. 48 hours later, Ethan dialed Mia's cell phone directly, his first unmediated communication since the divorce litigation had launched, cutting legal representation out of the conversation entirely. "Mia, let's meet alone, no attorneys present." Mia consented without pushback. They arranged to convene at an outdoor lakeside cafe overlooking Silver Lake, a quiet scenic spot popular for midweek afternoon visits. Thin, pale winter sunlight filtered through bare tree branches, lacking any warmth, while a handful of rental rowboats drifted slowly across the water's surface. When Mia arrived, Ethan already occupied a metal patio table, an unsweetened black iced Americano resting untouched before him, his unchanging beverage preference etched into her memory after years of shared cohabitation. "It's been weeks since we last spoke face-to-face," Ethan acknowledged, forcing a stiff, hollow smile. 10 days since the initial court hearing, to be precise. Mia slid into the metal chair across from him, ordering a steaming hot herbal tea from the passing server. A heavy silence settled between them, broken only by the rhythmic creak of wooden oars from the lake's rowboats, a slow, monotonous rhythm echoing the stagnation of their dissolved marriage. "You've secured the upper hand in this dispute," Ethan admitted quietly, his voice nearly swallowed by the frigid lake breeze. Chloe shared the core contents of those archived chat logs. "I deleted every trace of that conversation from my active devices, yet overlooked the cached backups stored on my retired laptop. You were always meticulous about documenting every detail, even unflattering professional missteps of mine, it seems." Mia watched sunlight fragment across the lake's choppy surface, glinting off small ripples stirred by the wind. "I never planned to submit this evidence publicly. If your legal team hadn't introduced the concealed income allegation to undermine my asset claims, these files would remain locked away permanently. What purpose does this admission serve now?" Ethan's tone carried bone-deep weariness. "I severely underestimated you over the past 2 years. I assumed you operated within predictable boundaries, unwilling to escalate conflict to this extreme. I never imagined you'd hold leverage capable of collapsing my entire career trajectory." "Boundaries." Mia repeated the word with a bitter, hollow laugh. You label my pursuit of legally entitled marital assets as excessive escalation, yet spent 2 years logging every minor grocery transaction to the cent and dismissing every professional grievance I brought forward as overreaction. Where was your consideration for balanced compromise then? Ethan offered no rebuttal, staring down into his cold coffee mug, defeated. After a lengthy pause, he spoke again, his voice stripped of all earlier arrogance. My mother's asking that we frame the divorce publicly as simple personality incompatibility to spare her embarrassment within her social circle. The core issue truly is incompatible personalities, Mia stood, slinging her canvas bag over one shoulder. Not the vague, generic incompatibility the public will hear about. Our core conflict lies in your obsession with quantifying every personal interaction through financial metrics, paired with a complete refusal to invest emotional care into our partnership. She turned and walked away without glancing back at Ethan's slumped figure seated at the patio table. The bitter lake wind tangled the fabric of her wool scarf around her neck, yet her spine remained straight, unbowed. Following that lakeside conversation, settlement negotiations progressed with unprecedented speed. Ethan formally withdrew all allegations of concealed freelance income, consenting to Mia's original asset division framework, separate ownership of all premarital assets, and even split of all property accumulated during their marriage, including a cash settlement compensating her for 50% of the private equity fund's 2-year market appreciation. Both parties signed the finalized divorce agreement in early December, filing official dissolution paperwork with the county clerk's office days later. The sky hung gray and overcast the morning they exited the municipal clerk's building, heavy clouds threatening an imminent snowfall. Mia clutched her newly issued dark red divorce certificate in one hand, pausing on the concrete entrance steps, momentarily adrift with no clear destination to head toward. A leafless, mature ginkgo tree stood planted beside the entry walkway, its final lone golden leaf clinging tenuously to an upper branch before swirling downward to settle on the pavement at her feet. The image pulled her mind back to the day she'd signed their marriage license 2 years prior, beneath the same fully leafed ginkgo tree, sunlight filtering through dense foliage to scatter golden light across the sidewalk. Back then, she'd clung to the naive belief that marriage promised mutual support and shared growth. Reality had revealed their union as two interlocking mechanical gears, externally seamless yet grinding away at one another with every rotational cycle. Her phone vibrated against her pocket, a text message arriving from Zoe. Mia, did everything go smoothly at the clerk's office? All paperwork finalized, Mia typed her reply, her tone steady and unemotional. Wonderful news. Congratulations on reclaiming your freedom. A group of us former admin team coworkers are grabbing dinner tonight at a local Sichuan restaurant, and we're hoping you'll join us. Several tech division staff members want to come too, folks who've been too nervous to file overtime wage claims themselves after watching your arbitration win. Mia hesitated briefly, uncertain if she possessed the emotional bandwidth to navigate a crowded celebratory dinner, yet Zoe's mention of the quiet tech division employees shifted her perspective. I'll be there tonight. The dinner reservation occupied a small private dining room seating roughly a dozen guests, a mix of familiar former administrative colleagues and unfamiliar tech division engineers Mia had only passed in office hallways prior. One unexpected attendee was Leo Morgan, a quiet senior software engineer who'd endured repeated public criticism from Ethan during team sprint meetings for falling behind development deadlines. Leo lingered isolated in the back of the room for the entire meal, barely speaking a word until the party prepared to depart. He stepped forward to stand before Mia, awkward and flustered, stumbling over his words as he voiced his gratitude. Ms. Hale, thank you for taking that stand against the company. Most of us have considered filing overtime claims for years, but we've always been too afraid of professional retaliation to act. Mia studied the young engineer, mid-20s, premature thinning hairline, permanent dark under-eye circles etched from years of uncompensated late-night development shifts. No gratitude necessary. When workplace unfairness impacts your livelihood, you're fully within your rights to pursue legal recourse. A single voice carries minimal weight, But every person willing to speak up strengthens collective bargaining power for everyone. Leo nodded fervently and stepped back to rejoin his friends. Zoe nudged Mia's elbow beside her, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial murmur. After your arbitration victory, half the admin team has reached out to ask me how to properly calculate unpaid overtime hours for potential claims. Mia smiled softly, remaining silent. She recognized her original arbitration lawsuit had never solely centered on recovering $20,000 in lost wages. The true victory was reclaiming the fundamental right to voice dissatisfaction without fear of professional ruin, a privilege far more valuable than any monetary settlement to dozens of overworked, silenced corporate staff across every division of Far Horizon Group. The dinner stretched late into the evening. By closing time, Zoe was mildly intoxicated, clinging tightly to Mia's arm, slurring half-coherent pleas for her to visit the corporate campus regularly. Mia escorted the young woman to a waiting rideshare vehicle, confirming the driver possessed her apartment address before stepping back onto the icy city street, suddenly adrift without a set destination. A text notification illuminated her phone screen, sent from Chloe. All digital evidence regarding the Skyward data breach has been permanently shredded and deleted per our agreement. No copies retained anywhere. Mia stared at the message for a long moment, exhaling a deep, weighted breath of relief. She had never intended to destroy Ethan's career permanently. Her demands had always centered on equitable settlement terms, not vindictive ruin. Now every unresolved grievance between them was fully settled, balanced evenly on both sides. Fine, delicate snowflakes began drifting down from the gray sky, settling lightly into her hair, woven wool scarf, and eyelashes. Mia stood beneath a glowing street lamp, watching snow swirl through the warm pool of artificial light, a sudden realization washing over her unhurriedly. Tomorrow morning, there would be no mandatory corporate clock-in time to adhere to. Mia's independent consulting studio, Trace After Rain, officially opened its doors the following January. She'd coined the name herself, weaving a subtle reference to her given name Mia alongside the quiet metaphor of lingering marks left behind after hardship fades. Her studio website homepage bore a short personal mission statement she'd drafted alone: "Rain leaves faint traces. Those traces do not always bloom into rainbows, yet they remain proof the storm passed." The studio offered a broad spectrum of creative corporate services: brand copywriting, presentation slide design, full event strategy planning, and high-end presentation formatting. The initial launch months brought consistent financial uncertainty, with client leads trickling in slowly through former corporate colleagues and professional networking connections. Her first month of operation generated roughly $1,100 in gross revenue, barely covering studio rent and basic monthly living expenses. The second month climbed to $1,600, the third nearly $2,000. While the income fell far short of her former six-figure corporate salary at Far Horizon Group, she no longer endured uncompensated all-night overtime shifts, mandatory deference to superiors, or the endless granular budgeting friction that had poisoned her marriage. Most importantly, she reclaimed time to nurture creative passions abandoned during her corporate career. She'd studied digital illustration during university, setting sketching aside entirely amid heavy administrative workloads and marital tension. She enrolled in an advanced online illustration course, dedicating 2 uninterrupted hours every evening to drawing on her digital tablet. The smooth drag of stylus across the screen reawakened the uncomplicated joy she'd felt as a teenager scribbling doodles across textbook margins, a quiet happiness buried beneath years of corporate and domestic pressure yet never fully extinguished. One mid-March afternoon, Mia received an unexpected incoming call from an unfamiliar phone number. The caller identified themselves as the human resources lead at Forward Vision Tech, a fast-growing startup enterprise specializing in corporate leadership training. The HR representative explained they'd discovered her professional profile hosted on a freelance creative platform, drawn specifically to the brief note detailing her prior workplace arbitration against Far Horizon Group. "I haven't submitted any formal applications to corporate roles recently," Mia responded, confused by the outreach. Our CEO personally reviewed your portfolio and background summary, the HR lead explained, the youthful, unscripted candor typical of startup culture evident in their tone. He stated any professional willing to advocate firmly for their legal rights without compromising integrity would bring exceptional leadership and ethical judgment to our executive operations director position. We're reaching out to gauge your interest in an in-person interview for the full-time leadership role. Mia gripped her phone tightly, memories flooding her mind unbidden. Clara's dismissive phone call dismissing her ability to stand against a massive corporate entity, Ethan's cold ultimatum delivered in the stairwell landing, every coworker's whispered judgment following her arbitration filing. Those once crushing voices had faded entirely, replaced by a leadership team that viewed her willingness to fight for fair treatment as a coveted professional strength. I appreciate the generous offer, yet I'm fully committed to running my independent consulting studio at this time and unable to accept a full-time executive role, Mia replied honestly. The HR lead refused to pressure her, instead extending an open invitation to tour their startup office and discuss potential freelance collaboration opportunities. Their corporate training curriculum required custom long-form copywriting, a service Mia's studio specialized in delivering. Once the call disconnected, Mia settled onto her studio's south-facing balcony, staring at the potted fern she'd rescued from her former corporate desk. The plant had wilted constantly inside Far Horizon's dim, over-air-conditioned administrative wing, yet flourished abundantly in her sunlit studio space, new trailing fronds spilling over the edge of its ceramic planter, stretching nearly 2.5 feet downward. Plants thrived when transplanted into an environment that nourished their needs. Humans operated by the same uncomplicated rule. She received word of Ethan's professional downfall the following April, delivered via a lengthy voice note from Zoe. The young admin assistant's tone buzzed with barely restrained shock as she recounted the corporate scandal unfolding at Far Horizon Group. Internal auditors had uncovered manipulated algorithmic performance data within the Skyward platform phase to build, triggering a full executive-level investigation. Vice President Carter had formally stripped Ethan of his tech director title, demoting him to a junior senior software engineer position with a drastically reduced salary. Horizon Tech Suppliers, the vendor he'd improperly shared confidential tender data with years prior, had been permanently blacklisted from all future Far Horizon procurement contracts. Mia stared at the voice note playback screen for several quiet seconds before typing a concise text reply to Zoe, "I've heard the updates." No rush of vengeful satisfaction surged through her chest, no triumphant relief. Only a gentle, muted sense of closure, equivalent to finishing a dense, exhausting novel and sliding it onto a distant bookshelf, never to revisit its pages again. She'd kept her promise to withhold the cached chat logs from corporate investigators. Ethan's professional collapse stemmed from his own internal project fraud, uncovered independently by internal audit teams, not evidence she'd supplied. Some consequences required no outside intervention. Time would always settle outstanding balances unassisted. By late May, Trace After Rain secured its largest single client contract since opening, a comprehensive brand identity redesign package for a mid-sized regional manufacturing firm, with a total contract value of roughly $16,500. To celebrate the milestone signing, Mia booked a reservation at a highly rated local Japanese sushi restaurant, treating herself to a full premium dinner. Midway through her meal, her phone rang once more with an unfamiliar number. "Mia, it's Elaine." It took Mia 2 full heartbeats to place the voice belonging to Ethan's mother. She set down her wooden chopsticks, her shoulders instinctively tensing with old residual tension. "Mrs. Reed, how may I help you?" "I heard you've built a successful independent consulting studio for yourself. Well-deserved success." Elaine's voice lacked its usual sharp, domineering volume, weighted with a weary, humbled softness Mia had never previously heard. "I assume you've received word about Ethan's professional demotion at Far Horizon Group. The entire situation has been devastating for him. I've been informed of the audit results. I'm not contacting you to beg for leniency on his behalf," Elaine clarified immediately, eliminating any expectation of compromise. I simply wanted to speak plainly, without prior filtering. Ethan grew up in an environment that prioritized rigid numerical accountability above all else. My husband and I raised him to separate every transaction into clear gain and loss, never teaching him that emotional connections cannot be tallied within a budget spreadsheet. Mia remained silent, sunlight filtering through the restaurant's rice paper window panels, casting warm golden streaks across her ceramic sushi platter. Ultimately, my husband and I failed to teach him the difference between financial accounting and emotional care. Elaine's tone carried genuine remorse, a rare admission of fault from the formerly unyielding woman. I owe you an apology for every dismissive, judgmental remark I directed toward you during your marriage. Women deserve independent professional fulfillment beyond supporting a spouse's career trajectory, and you understood that truth far earlier than I ever did. Mia ended the call without further conversation, sitting alone at her restaurant table long after her sushi grew cold, untouched. She'd spent years resisting the layered societal pressures imposed by her husband, mother-in-law, corporate leadership, and judgmental coworkers, yet the conflict resolved not through explosive confrontation, but quiet, unanticipated remorse from the woman who'd once pressured her to abandon her own ambitions entirely. Peace required no formal truce or handshake. It arrived the moment outside voices lost their power to wound her. Summer arrived, bringing consistent stability to Trace after Rain's client roster. Mia retained a part-time freelance graphic design assistant to manage overflow project workloads, expanding studio services to include short-form corporate marketing video scripting and editing. Her monthly gross revenue stabilized above $2,800, a steady, sustainable income stream that required no mandatory overtime or corporate oversight. The daily schedule felt busy yet fulfilling, a sharp contrast to her former administrative career, every hour of labor translated directly to tangible creative progress belonging solely to her. No credit diverted to upper management or corporate shareholders. One late July evening, Mia attended a cross-industry creative networking reception hosted inside a downtown high-rise event venue. As she exited the keynote presentation hall and walked down the carpeted hallway, she locked eyes with Hannah Wells, former deputy marketing director of Far Horizon Group. Hannah had collaborated closely with Ethan throughout the Skyward platform development cycle, and corporate office gossip had long linked her romantically to him during Mia's marriage. Their prior interactions had been limited to brief, surface-level conference room exchanges. No personal friendship ever formed between them. They froze mid-step simultaneously, equally surprised by the chance encounter. Mia hail. Hannah wore a tailored beige linen suit, her makeup polished yet unable to fully conceal dark exhaustion beneath her eyes. She appeared noticeably thinner than Mia recalled from their corporate days. Hannah, it's been months since we last crossed paths. Hannah offered a complicated, bittersweet smile. I'm no longer deputy marketing director, actually. I resigned from Far Horizon back in early spring. She paused, glancing around the quiet hallway. Are you here for the creative industry networking mixer? That's correct. They lingered beside a small round beverage table positioned at the hallway's far end, exchanging sparse, casual small talk. Mia learned Hannah had accepted a mid-level marketing role at a significantly smaller regional enterprise post-resignation, accepting a pay cut and reduced corporate influence to escape the toxic fallout of the Skyward scandal. The entire marketing division had faced budget cuts and leadership restructuring following Ethan's demotion, with every staff member tied to the project suffering collateral professional damage. I've spent months processing the rumors circulating about Ethan and me last year, Hannah volunteered abruptly, her voice soft and introspective, a quiet confession shared only for Mia's ears. We never acted on any romantic attraction, yet I recognize I clung to admiration for his position of power rather than genuine affection for his character. I wrapped my own professional ambition inside admiration for his corporate authority, convincing myself the fondness was authentic. Mia listened without interruption, allowing her to unpack years of unspoken internal conflict. Once you filed arbitration, resigned, finalized the divorce, and the Skyward data fraud scandal erupted, I watched Ethan's carefully constructed professional reputation crumble entirely. I realized my admiration was directed at a hollow facade built on corporate rank and institutional authority, not the flawed, rigid man beneath the title. It took half a year of self-reflection to untangle that delusion. Hannah lowered her gaze to her cold, disposable coffee cup, a faint self-deprecating laugh escaping her lips. How long did it take you to recognize the emptiness of your marriage to him? 2 full years of shared cohabitation, plus 700 unpaid overtime hours that finally forced me to break the cycle of compromise, Mia replied, smiling faintly. Hannah stared at her for a beat before joining in the quiet laugh. 2 women once positioned on opposing sides of a corporate marital scandal stood side by side in a dim office hallway, sharing a quiet moment of mutual understanding, no lingering resentment between them. Only the profound relief of surviving shared hardship and emerging with clearer self-awareness. I've carried a single unspoken question for over a year. Hannah dropped her light-hearted tone, meeting Mia's gaze with unwavering sincerity. When you filed that arbitration lawsuit against Far Horizon Group, were you paralyzed by fear? Absolutely terrified, Mia answered without hesitation, no attempt to minimize her past anxiety. I feared losing my stable corporate career, the complete collapse of my marriage, endless public gossip painting me as a troublemaker, the possibility of walking away from the entire dispute with nothing to show for my sacrifice. Yet the greater fear lay in continuing to exist within a suffocating, unbalanced cycle, logging uncompensated overtime without recognition, tolerating constant dismissal of my personal boundaries, splitting every household expense to the penny while receiving zero emotional reciprocity in return. Hannah fell silent for several long moments, the city's twilight sky darkening outside the venue's floor-to-ceiling glass windows, thousands of office lights flicking on one by one across the sprawling metropolitan landscape. You possess extraordinary courage, she said finally. This wasn't bravery by choice. Mia lifted her canvas studio bag over one shoulder, preparing to depart. I reached a dead end with nowhere left to retreat except forward. We should exchange contact information to connect for coffee sometime. I'd like that very much. Mia stepped out of the glass building entrance into full nighttime darkness, pausing on the concrete front steps to tilt her head upward toward the city sky. Blinding commercial neon signage washed out the faint pinprick stars overhead, yet she knew the celestial bodies continued orbiting their predetermined paths regardless of human light pollution, requiring no outside validation to justify their existence. She flagged a waiting rideshare vehicle curbside, sliding into the back passenger seat. "Where to tonight?" the driver asked, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. "Take me to my studio apartment downtown." Mia provided the street address, pausing briefly before correcting her own wording with quiet certainty. "Take me home." The driver shot her a quick, confused glance in the rearview mirror, perplexed by her contradictory phrasing, yet asked no follow-up questions, pressing the gas pedal to merge smoothly into the evening rush-hour traffic flow. Mia leaned her head against the cool vehicle window, watching endless streetlights recede backward in a steady golden blur. Her phone illuminated with an incoming photo text from Zoe, accompanied by a short caption, "Look how your fern's grown. It's the break room's most popular plant now." The attached image captured the potted fern Mia had abandoned at her former administrative desk, its trailing vines stretching nearly 6 feet long, climbing the entire length of the break room's south-facing window frame. Lush green fronds bathed in unfiltered midday sunlight, thriving without the restrictive corporate office environment that had stunted its growth for years. Mia typed a brief reply on her phone's touchscreen. "It looks beautiful. Keep watering it regularly for me." She locked the device's screen and lifted her gaze once more toward the window. The rideshare crossed the wide river spanning the city's central district, the water's surface shimmering with reflected skyscraper illumination, streaks of golden light rippling outward across every wave. A half-forgotten line of poetry surfaced in her memory, a quiet metaphor resonating perfectly with her journey. Rivers never pause to negotiate boundaries with their shorelines, they simply keep flowing forward. That was all she needed to do, too. Keep flowing forward.